The battle between John Wayne and Clint Eastwood for Western movie supremacy in the 60s and 70s included some great movies in the early 1970s. And this one is rarely talked about because the plot doesn't really fit Clint Eastwood, but the Western style does. Now, Joe Kidd starred the great Clint Eastwood and, of course, the great Robert Duvall. It was written by Elmore Leonard, directed by John Sturges. The film is about an ex-bounty hunter hired by a wealthy landowner named Frank Harlan to track down Mexican revolutionary leader Louis Chama, who was fighting for land reform. It forms part of the revisionist Western genre. John Saxon is in as well, very good character actor. Edited by Ferris Webster, music by Lalo Schifrin. Again, Universal Pictures released July 1972 and made $6.3 million at the box office as one of the top westerns of the year. Now, in this one, in the town of Sonora, New Mexico, in the early 1900s, Joe Kidd, a disaffected former bounty hunter, is in jail for hunting on Indian land, disturbing the peace. Mexican bandito revolutionary Louis Chama, played by John Saxon, has organized a peasant revolt against the local landowners who are throwing the poor off their ancestral lands and raids the courthouse. A posse is formed by wealthy landowner Frank Harlan, played with devious glee by Robert Duvall, to capture Chama. Kidd is invited to join but declines. Harlan persists and Kidd relents when he learns that Chama's band has raided his ranch and attacked one of the workers there. The posse is made up of numerous ruthless men, some of them armed with new-style rifles that have much greater range from previous types. Now, the posse rides into a village near Chama's hideout and forces the villagers into the church at gunpoint. They threaten to kill 5 Mexican hostages unless Chama surrenders. Harlan no longer trusts Kidd and throws him into the church too to prevent him from helping Helen, a female captive who, unbeknownst to Harlan, is also Chama's lady love and the other Mexican hostages. Kidd manages a daring escape. He saves the hostages by fighting Chama and his associates and forcing them to comply with his wishes. He lets Harlan and the posse know he will deliver Chama to Sheriff Mitchell, played by Gregory Walcott, in town. The posse moves ahead to intercept a train back to Sonora, while a lone shooter engages Kidd and his party. These are pinned down as Mingo, the best shot of Harlan's group, has a high-powered rifle and he's firing from the rocks above. However, as Kidd has managed to obtain one of them during his escape, assembles a gun and manages to kill Mingo. Now, when Kidd and the captured Chama arrive in town, they discover Harlan is already there with the rest of the posse survivors, planning to kill them all. Kidd intends to go through with his plan. To get to the jail, Kidd drives a steam train through the town saloon. Very important scene, by the way. A gunfight ensues between Kidd and Harlan's men. Kidd triumphs over the other men and manages to kill Harlan in the courthouse by hiding in the judge's chair. Chama then surrenders to Mitchell. Kidd punches the sheriff because the sheriff had punched him during the poaching arrest, collects his things, and leaves town with Helen. Now, Don Strode is always also in this, with Dick Van Patten in a character role, and of course Clint Ritchie as well. Now, Eastwood was given a script by Jennings Lang, written by novelist Elmore Leonard. Originally called the Sonora Courthouse Raid, it was about a character inspired by Rias Tijerina, an ardent supporter of Robert F. Kennedy, known for storming a courthouse in Tierra Amarilla, New Mexico, in an incident in June 1967, taking hostages and demanding that Hispanic people have their ancestral lands returned to them. Leonard depicted Tijerina in his story, a man he called Louis Chama, as an egomaniac, a role which went to John Saxon. Duvall was cast as Harlan, a ruthless landowner who hires Eastwood's character, a former frontier guide named Joe Kidd, to track down the culprits and scare them away. Don Stroud, who had appeared alongside Eastwood in Coogan's Bluff, was cast as another sour villain who encounters Joe Kidd. Now, directed by Sturges, who had previously hemmed such westerns as Gunfight, the OK Corral, The Magnificent Seven, Hour the Gun, filming began in Old Tucson in November 1971, overlapping with another film production, John Huston's The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, which was just wrapping up shooting. Outdoor sequences of film were shot near Bishop, California, a very beautiful place, southeast of Yosemite. The actors were initially uncertain about the strength of the 3 main characters in the film and how the hero Joe Kidd would come across. According to Leonard, the initial slow development between the 3 was probably because the cast was so initially awestruck by having Sturges direct that he surrendered authority to him. Eastwood was not in perfect health during the movie, and we'll get into that in a second. Now, like I said, according to Publish at the time, He was suffering from symptoms that suggested a bronchial infection, but it was some kind of massive flu going around. He was also suffering from panic attacks, false reported in the media as having allergy to horses. During production, the script for the finale was altered when producer Robert Daly jokingly said that a train should crash through the barroom in the climax, and he was taken seriously by cast and crew who thought it was a great idea. It was several movies where Saxon played a Mexican. Of course, he did the Bruce Lee movie later on. Now, Joe Kidd was released in the States in July 72, $5.8 million at the box office. The film received a mixed reception from critics. Roger Greenspun of the New York Times wrote, for perhaps his first half hour, Sturges' new Western Joe Kidd looks surprisingly good. Nothing remarkable, but honestly decent. A feeling that persists with continually diminishing assurance, almost until the climax when everything is thrown away in a flash of false theatrics. Foolish symbolism, and what I suspect is sloppy editing. Now, Roger Ebert gave the film 2 stars out of 4 and wrote, all I can tell you about Clint Eastwood and Joe Kidd is that he plays a ruthless gunman in a few words. This isn't actually exactly a surprise. Eastwood always plays a ruthless gunman, etc. The funny thing about Joe Kidd, though, is that we can't keep straight whose side he's on or why. Now, Gene Siskel awarded the same 2-star grade and said, film with all manner of inconsistencies, the Joe Kidd character is really a prop for a series of violent incidents. Now, Variety wrote, not enough identity is given Eastwood in a New Mexico land struggle in which no reason is apparent for his involvement, but John Sturges' direction of the Elmore Leonard screenplay is sufficiently compelling to keep guns popping and bodies falling. Now, Kevin Thomas of the LA Times called it a concise, solidly crafted Western that attests to the Canadian flexibility of his durable genre. The New York Post praised the actors' performances while criticizing the film, calling the actors diamonds set in dung. Now, Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 80% based on reviews from 10 critics. Now, ironically, I saw this movie in French as sort of like an afternoon, production on our local show TV, which is now as part of the CTV network. And I found that going up against John Saxon and Robert Duvall, because Saxon and Duvall at the time were rising into ranks in their acting style. Duvall, Saxon was doing Night Gallery. Duvall had already, performed strong and everything from True Grit and other performances. And this was the era of The Godfather. So a lot of people probably went to the movie to see Robert Duvall. But Clint Eastwood was not really the Clint Eastwood of the early to mid 70s, like the Dirty Harry Clint Eastwood. He wasn't really as driven. As once he got the Dirty Harry momentum continued with the sequels and all that, he became, Clint Eastwood. Back then, 3 stars out of 4. Now, I give this movie only 2 stars out of 4, not because it's a bad movie, but the plot doesn't make any sense, because if Eastwood's going to do something, there's going to be a reason behind it. You look at his performances, for example, not saying The Man with No Name style, but like Unforgiven and some of the other Westerns he did, High Plains Drifter and Pale Rider, there's a mystery to him, but you know what side he's on. With Joe Kidd, I mean, it may because it was a little bit fuzzy. And when your director did his best movie 15 years before, it's hard to keep the momentum of, the OK Corral tropes and stuff like that. But Duvall is really strong in here. But John Saxon, there's a podcast on my channel about after he passed. Is a very underrated actor because it's a poor man's Tony Curtis, and I've always liked John Saxon. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what we're doing with our Clint Eastwood Vintage podcast, let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, and share. And don't forget, the requests are always appreciated and always highly considered. Have a good one. Bye.